Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lit Podcast with Caroline
and Julie.
And every month we are going to come on here and talk about 3 of our favorite books from whatever month it is. So today we're here mid-February talking about our favorite January books.
The book I just finished is The Bastard Brigade, which is a story about these renegade scientists during World War II who basically sabotaged the atomic bomb. So I know in World War II there was the atomic bomb with that they did in Japan. But what we didn't know is that the Nazis were also attempting to build an atomic bomb. And if that had happened, if they had built an atomic bomb, that could have been very catastrophic, right? And a bunch of scientists and secret agents from the U.S. and allied nations actually worked together and broke into laboratories and did all these crazy escapades to basically halter any action of the Nazi scientists. It was a very interesting read. It's I don't read nonfiction often, so it was a good break from all the literary fiction I've been doing, and I'd really recommend it to anyone who is looking to branch into science because it approaches it in a very, I would say, digestible way, because the way that the author writes it is in almost like it's an action movie. You know what I mean?
The first book that I'm going to talk about today is The Vanishing Half, which is by Bennett. And I wrote a little summary out about it because there's a lot going on and I don't want to ruin anything. Some of the best things about the book is the suspense. So basically it's about these 2 light-skinned girls who run away from home when they are 16, and one marries a black man in D.C. and the other passes for white in California. And I don't think I made this clear earlier, but basically their whole town is light-skinned people, and they don't feel that they fit in because they feel that they can pass either way almost. The book talks a lot about it, so I don't want to, as I said before, give anything away, but it tracks their lives across generations as their lives branch away from each other and yet remain intertwined. It explores a lot of concepts about identity, family, and race in a proactive and compassionate way. And I genuinely could not put this book down at all. And I found out actually that HBO is planning a limited series based on the book.
No way.
Which is always the best. I loved when they did Little Fires Everywhere. I thought it was really good, and that's also a fabulous book. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the writing in the book is straightforward, but really descriptive in the right places. You don't there's a lot going on in the plot, but I never felt confused really.
That's good. And
the plot was never slow. And even though they discussed some really heavy topics, it was an effortless read because I was so encapsulated by the characters. So I really recommend The Vanishing Half.
Yeah, that sounds great. I feel like I've definitely seen the cover for that.
You definitely
book.
have. Yes.
I know it's very
everywhere.
Popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely, that's on my Goodreads to read list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So another book that I read recently was Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. And I picked it up by default because I wanted to read something by Murakami, and I went into the school library, and this was the only book they had. So it was, I just had to pick it up. But this is the Goodreads summary. So Toru, a quiet and preternaturally serious young college student in Tokyo, is devoted to Naoko, a beautiful and introspective young woman. But their mutual passion is marked by the tragic death of their best friend years before. Toru begins to adapt to campus life and the loneliness and isolation he faces there, but Naoko finds the pressures and responsibilities of life unbearable. As she retreats further into her own world, Toru finds himself reaching out to others and drawn to a fiercely independent and sexually liberated young woman. It is a magnificent blending of the music, the mood, and the ethos that was the 60s, with the story of one college student's romantic coming of age. Norwegian Wood brilliantly recaptures a young man's first, hopeless, and heroic love. I mean, I feel like by the way that it's described, it sounds very whimsical and romantic. It's a pretty tragic story, and when I saw that the library categorized it as a romance, I was a bit surprised because the ending is, it's not romantic in the way that a lot of American literature presents relationships. And, you know, it is a little bit, I would say, a more mature novel for sure, just in terms of there are scenes in the book that are very emotionally charged, and you know, I don't think it would be appropriate to read for anyone who is in like middle school, right? But it had a really beautiful message, I think, about life and the way that we learn things and the way that we have to live for ourselves and not for other people, and in the way that we love and interact with each other, that we have to, you know, the issue is that very often we want to project an identity onto someone and we fall in love with that identity, and just focusing on rather the person themselves and understanding them as an individual and not existing within them. So great message there. And also it was very beautifully written, just as the Goodreads has mentioned. I would heavily recommend it. There was this one line about calculus, like why do we learn calculus in school? Which I think is, I'm sure we all grapple with that question. I mean, you're taking calculus right now. Yes. Do you ever wonder, like, why the heck am I learning
every
this?
Day.
And they were saying that we learn these, like, complex types of math and English and grammar because it teaches us to learn and analyze systems. And that's just the way that it is in life, I guess, that if we're able to systematically think about things, we're therefore a better person. But, you know, so that's Norwegian Wood.
Okay. The next book I read, funny story, in English, Mr. McAteer, who I hope is listening this far, let us pick what books we wanted to read. And so I chose The Nazi Officer's Wife, How One Jewish Woman Survived the Holocaust, which is a biography by Edith Hahn with the help of Susan Dworkin. We did not realize, my group, that this was a biography until the first day after reading it.
Oh, wow.
And Mr. McAteer told us that we specifically could not choose a biography to read. So my group had to do a 180, and we ended up reading How the Garcia Girls Lost Their Accents, which was really good. But I'd already read maybe 4 chapters of this book, and I really enjoyed it. So I actually wanted to finish it before I continued reading with my book group. So I genuinely read this book in 2 days. It was that good in the midst of all my tests. And it was just fabulous. And basically, it is, as I said before, the biography of Edith Hahn, who is a Holocaust survivor. She was born into a middle-class, non-observant Jewish family in Vienna. So the book starts off when she is at school studying law, and how that gets abruptly interrupted by the Nazi invasion and the rise of Hitler. And it follows her journey of surviving the Holocaust. And it's just super interesting hearing about her journey, firsthand encounter. It's not really like a lot of Holocaust stories that I have read before. It just talks about her life as, like, she goes back when she was little, like what it was like growing up in Vienna and just how she survived it. She ended up, I don't want to spoil a lot because I feel like with all these books, it's so easy to ruin them. But she ends up, towards the middle of the book, she marries a Nazi officer. And that's ultimately how she is able to survive. And it was just a fascinating book. And I could not put it down. And it's probably one of the best books I've ever read, and I really recommend it.
Yeah, that sounds... The last book that I'm going to be talking about for me is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And this is a book that was so rich in language. I felt it's like poetry, basically. You know, you're reading and almost everything is in metaphors. And you're also, the narration is I would say it's a little confusing because it's not particularly on the same person. It's third-person narration, but, like, each chapter is kind of focused on a different thing. You know how, like, Euphoria had an episode on each person? Mm-hmm. It's sort of like that. Yes. Like, they give you background on different people, and then time seems to, like, work in reverse. But it explores these, you know, different characters of this Black family, right? And the protagonist is a Black 11-year-old, Pecola Breedlove, and Pecola prays for her eyes to turn blue so that she'll be as beautiful and beloved as all the other blonde and blue-eyed children in America. They constantly reference Shirley Temple throughout the book as like the cutest little white kid, you know, that everyone wants to look like. And in the autumn of 1941, the year the marigolds in the Breedlove's gardens do not bloom, you know, her life does change in painful, devastating ways. And Goodreads says, what its vivid evocation of the fear and loneliness at the heart of a child's yearning and the tragedy of its fulfillment, The Bluest Eye remains one of Toni Morrison's most powerful, unforgettable novels and a significant work of American fiction. And I think this book is especially pertinent not just to, you know, obviously as a minority there are certain ideas that you're put onto what is like the beauty standard, but I think for any person of any race, you know, you can really read this book and understand the tragedy that's going on and really feel for this young girl who wants so badly to have these blue eyes, you know, and it's just such a significant idea. And obviously this won a Nobel Prize, so you're getting a really good book for this read. And it's a short one too.
I got this book for Christmas. I'm going to bring it on break next week.
Yes.
Hopefully read it. It looks very good. The last book that I'm going to be talking about, and maybe Julie can chime in because she has read it, is Normal People by Sally Rooney, which has been all over social media.
Oh, yes.
One thing to note before reading the book is that Sally Rooney does not use quotation marks in her writing. So it took me a few chapters to get used to it and fully be able to follow along. But I mean, after a few chapters, it's totally fine. And I just finished actually Conversations with Friends, which is another one of her books. And I didn't even notice it, that the quotation marks weren't there. But basically, the book is about the two protagonists are Connell and Marianne, and the book takes place in Ireland. And they're in it starts off when they're in high school, and they're in opposite social circles, not only in school, but in life. Connell is very popular and like the star of the soccer team, whereas Marianne, the Goodreads describes her as lonely, proud, and intensely private. But where it gets a little bit messy is that Connell's mom is actually Marianne's housekeeper. Marianne's family is very wealthy, whereas Connell's family is not. And I don't want to say what happens because I don't want to ruin the book, but also everyone knows. But basically their lives become really intertwined and they end up going to the same college. And it follows their relationship through the end of high school and then college and a little bit post-college, and just the ups and downs of their dynamic, when they're close, when they're not. And it was, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it because it was just, there was so much going on. And on Goodreads it says Sally Rooney brings her brilliant psychological acuity and perfectly spare prose to a story that explores the subtleties of the class, the electricity of first love, and the complex entanglements of family and friendship. And I think that perfectly sums up the book without giving away a lot of spoilers to that.
Yeah, my favorite thing about this book was that as the characters grow up, you also see like their problems become more and more mature. Like when they're in high school, it's very trivial. Like, oh, like, you know, he's popular and he's like, she's rich and I'm poor, you know. But then as they grow up, it gets a little bit more twisted. And then you not only see them grow in their issues, but also in their recollections of high school. They have a maturity. And I think in that reflection, we're able to learn more about how we approach life and how we approach our issues changes with age. It's such an important message for young readers.
So those are our book recommendations of January. Sorry, this podcast went a little bit long, but we will be back next month, hopefully, with 3 more books that we think that everyone should read.
Oh,
so
yeah. You know, it's kind of
take our word for it. Read the books that we say are good. Hopefully everyone, if they do read them, they like the books.
We both read a book kind of on the Holocaust, World War II. Another one about like, what's it called? Like a twisted romance. And then we also both read a book about like a minority experience. Yeah.
Yes.
That's so
Which
funny.
is so interesting. Well, maybe that pattern will happen next month, but you'll have to tune in and see.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.